grad school was the first time, and I think we talked about this last time that I saw you, that was the first time I actually felt like I was learning stuff that I was going to use
Hmm.
in my career.
The following is a conversation with Airicka Garnere, who is currently pursuing a master's degree in mental health counseling at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Among other things, I ask her about what led her to pursue psychology as a career, the grad school application process, and the lessons she's learned throughout her journey so far. So your client meeting was a wash?
It was a wash. Yes. Yeah. We're dealing with some people who are only joining the study to get the Amazon gift cards that we give them at the end. So they show up, they ask how long it is, and then they decide it's way too long for what they're looking for.
When
So
when the bribery works a little too well.
a little too well. Yeah. Yeah. They're offered 100 all the way at the end, in like different increments. And they think that they get it, I think, just by a single call. So that's what we're working with
Yikes.
right now, unfortunately.
All right, so I thought we might start by having you lay out a little bit about your background, maybe
Yeah.
what sparked your initial interest in psychology, and then sort of segue to the decision to pursue grad school.
Sure, yeah. So I started as a little senior in high school, and people were asking me what the heck I wanted to do when I got older, and I had no idea. I had watched a lot of Law and Order, and I joke that I feel like that was kind of the starting point. So I enrolled at John Jay, in their forensic psychology program, thinking that I kind of wanted to be in the courtroom, doing a lot of that work. My mom also went to John Jay, so I feel like that weirdly enough gave me some interest in it. And then I got there and I did it for about a year, and I was like, I actually don't want to do this at all. It's a very hard field to get into. It is not like the shows. That's actually what they tell you immediately. You might have a couple cases once in a blue, and it is not what it's all panned out to be. So then I started thinking, well, what can I do with this degree that has to do with, therapy and counseling, but is not like Law and Order, was kind of my starting point. And then they were like, well, you can also use this degree and kind of just go into a more broad idea of psychology. And that's when I stayed there. I kept deciding to just go. I was really scared to change my major, so I feel like that also had a bit to do with it. And then, yeah, it probably wasn't until I decided to go to grad school super late. It was COVID. I graduated with my undergrad in 2021. It was COVID, and I was like, okay, well, I'm about to have this degree, and I have no clue what the heck I'm going to do with it. So what are my options? What can I do with just a bachelor's? And upon some search, which I think a lot of people know, you can't do a lot with only a bachelor's degree in the psych field. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to apply and I'm going to try it out. And I got into my current program. So it was kind of like, those are kind of the stepping stones that got me into the program to begin with.
What was the application process like?
So I actually got lucky in applying during COVID times. So they actually weren't accepting GRE scores. They were actually waiving them at the time. So I really had to hone in on my letters of recommendation, my personal statement, and my transcript, just how well I did in my undergrad courses. So yeah, I had to go through the whole process of contacting old professors who I hadn't seen in a very long time, considering, again, COVID times. I hadn't been in an actual classroom in probably like a year and a half by the time the application process was started. So that was already hard. I was asking people who hadn't seen me in that long, or asking people who have literally never seen me face to face, I guess, to go out on a limb and just really hopefully write an awesome recommendation letter for me. And I ended up getting those letters, which was very satisfying. My school made it easy. They just submitted them right through my school's portal. Did that, and then, yeah, really sat down and had to put a lot of work into my personal statement, because again, I feel like GRE is hard to prep for, but it does help just showing your academics as a whole. And when you don't have that and you only have your undergrad scores and a letter, you kind of really have to hone into that and try to come up with a really good personal statement. So that was really, I think that was probably the most stressful part of the entire thing, just figuring out what the heck I was going to write. Mhm.
How much time did you carve out for the application process all told?
So I probably spent maybe a month, I would say, in total. Um, Full transparency that had to be way quicker than I think that I would have liked it to be. I said before that I didn't even decide I wanted to go to grad school until probably February. So there were a lot of schools that had already started accepting applications, had closed their application process, and my school, I believe, was accepting until like the first week of March. So I had from when I decided I wanted to go to grad school and 4 weeks from then to hand in this application. Um, so I would have loved to have some more time. I probably would have given more energy into what professors I contacted.
Mm.
It was really like whoever answers me, cool, and give this to me, and that's awesome. I maybe would have been more picky about who I reached out to, which ones I accepted. Um, Maybe would have had more people go over my personal statement. I completely just wrote it and used Grammarly and was like, let's hope that this is a real, it really came from the heart. And I was like, let's hope that this is a good personal statement. And yeah, I would say the longest thing in all of that, my school was pretty good at giving me my old transcript and doing all of that. But the biggest thing was even when you contact somebody and ask them to write you a letter and they say, yeah, these people are professors, their job, they have other jobs, they're parents, they're whatever. So there was a bit of stressfulness in the sense of, okay, I heard from you 2 weeks ago that you're going to write this letter and I don't want to stress you out, but like, I really need this letter in by whatever day. So I think that definitely was the hardest part overall, just because you kind of have to just literally put your future into somebody else's hands just for a minute, right? Just like, I really hope you write this and I hope it sounds good. And I hope you do it by the time I'm asking you to. And, it's like, it's a lot of trust to put into somebody else. And there's nothing you can do about it besides send follow-up emails and hope that they answer. So, yeah.
Send follow-up emails and hope.
And hope, yeah, yeah. And it ended up working out fine. They were great. They sent them when they needed to. But again, that was definitely the one thing that's out of your control. I mean, of course, if it's a regular process and you're waiting for your scores or whatever, you're waiting for your transcript, but that was one of the big things for me that was like, I can't do anything but just hope that other people have my back. So yeah, that was really stressful. And that's definitely what I think took the longest overall of the very few things that I had to do, I will say, because of COVID. Yeah.
Did you apply to other programs apart from John Jay?
So I did not. I actually put all my hope into this. And again, that was not by choice. That was because of my deadline. I decided way too late. So for people watching, I feel like you should decide soon and plan ahead. Because I decided very late and it really narrowed my choices. So I was looking at I definitely knew that I wanted to be in a program that was in New York simply because it makes the licensure process much easier after I graduate. So I knew I wanted to be in New York. I was looking at some that were close to me because I really didn't want to commute. I had been commuting and living in Brooklyn and doing the whole thing for so long that I was like, I would love to just go to a school that's like 30, 40 minutes from home. And actually, SUNY New Paltz has an awesome clinical psychology program for grad school, and I would have loved to apply there, but I had missed it. It was way too late, and John Jay was accepting them later. I had already gone there for undergrad, so I was like, let's just try. If I don't get in, I'll just take, a year off, a semester off, however long it takes for me to apply to other places, and I'll see what happens. But I got in, thank God, so I didn't have to do that. But yeah, John Jay was, really the definition of putting all your eggs into one basket, because I was just praying to the Lord that I got in there. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
How has John Jay been treating you? How's the program going so far?
John Jay has been a whirlwind, I will say. I think that it is a mix of virtual and in-person learning, right? So I started when colleges were just starting to begin allowing again students to actually come onto campus. So it was a mix of everyone's coming back in, everyone trying to get into a flow of like, oh, this is really weird. We're on campus. We have to wear masks, which is fine. But just being there in general, right, was just a very weird feeling. And I do think that I got very used to online learning. It was awful at first when I first started it. And then the idea of having to go in person and actually sit and listen to a lecture was like, oh my goodness, I haven't learned like this in a very long time. So that was a rough kind of adjustment. And then I would just say overall, I go to a very big school. And I think that if I was going to a smaller one that maybe was more expensive, I would have certain opportunities that I don't have. And it might not be a money thing, it might not be a size thing, it may just be my school as it is. But I do feel like there are a lot of things that I kind of just figure out on my own in terms of outside support. I really had to hone in on adulting and just finding ways to answer my own questions. And that might be sending an extra email to my school or, you know, things like that. But I feel like they gave us an initial orientation in the very beginning. This is what you have to do, and good luck doing it, I think is the best way I can describe it. So if you have any questions along the way, you have to take it upon yourself to go and find them from Google or from a mentor or from John Jay themselves, either way. It's definitely just been a little bit of a process overall,
Yeah.
I would say. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What year are you in?
So I am about to start my third year. My goal was 2 and some change. It's looking like 3 because of this internship that I have to do these hours for. But yeah, I have 2 under my belt. I am very close to being done with my classes. I have 2 actual classes left. So my final year will really just be finishing those 2 classes and then my internship hours, because I can't graduate until I complete them.
If you could go back in time and give some advice to yourself entering first day of classes of, you know, in the program, any tips, tricks, best practices?
Yeah, that's a good one. I would say don't be scared to ask questions. I think that would be my first one. I think that there were a lot of times in meetings or in lectures or even in orientation where I wasn't entirely sure I fully grasped what they were talking about. And instead of speak up and ask, I was like, oh, I'll just cross that bridge when I get there. And then life happens, you blink and the bridge is here and you're like, crap, I really should have handled that sooner. Because then once you pose that question, you have what, a week, if that, to get an answer, right? By the time somebody answers you, there's a big chunk of time in between that. And normally by the time you ask the question, you really need an answer now, and you don't have that luxury anymore. I would also say asking questions in terms of what support I was going to get. I think that my annoyance with my lack of perceived support in my program is really rooted in I thought that I was going to get a lot more than I am. I feel like my expectation was very high. And I feel like if I had known it was going to be low, I might have been able to better mentally prepare myself. Because again, I went to John Jay for undergrad, and I didn't have an awful experience, but it wasn't like, this is the best school ever, I feel so supported. You know, it was cheap, it did what it needed to do, and I got my degree. That's just what that is. But when I came into grad school, I kind of had this thought where like, oh, well, this is a graduate program, right? Like they're going to be on it. This is really the next level. And they're going to give me all the support, and they're going to be here for all these questions. And again, I don't feel like that was met. And I feel like if I had asked them in the beginning, like, hey, what do I do if I have a question? Who can I reach out to? How soon will this question be answered? If I have a hard time finding an internship and I need this internship to graduate, what do I do? Just like little things like that. Because again, I feel like my bar was so high and it just was never met. So I feel like younger me should have just either prepared for that or maybe just chosen a different school that I knew that those expectations were going to be met. Because some people don't flourish well with that. I think that I've done a good job navigating through, but that's not for everybody, and that's fine.
Yeah, the ability, so ask questions to sort of mitigate expectations. How have your classes been? I mean, apart from the support piece, how has, you know, it felt learning wise?
Yes, I'm happy you asked, because I feel this has been a big like John Jay boo, but I do feel like grad school was the first time, and I think we talked about this last time that I saw you, that it was the first time I actually felt like I was learning stuff that I was going to use in my career. I feel like undergrad was a lot of theories and backgrounds and XYZ, and that's great. You need that. You need that foundation level. But I remember ending my bachelor's program and being like, I don't know if what I have currently, if I could be a functioning therapist, a functioning forensic psychologist, whatever it is, whatever somebody wants to do with just a bachelor's psychology degree as a whole. I was like, I don't know if like I have the training necessary. It was a very base level of everything. I would say I really didn't get into my courses in undergrad until I took my 2 capstones, which was my final year. But grad school, it's less classes. So my undergrad was 120 credits. My grad school is 60 credits. So it is half the classes. You can get it done much faster, ideally, depending on how much time you can allot to it. But I do feel like when I'm in classes, I'm like taking notes and I'm like, wow, well, you can say this, you can tackle an issue in this way, or these are different skills that you use when you're talking to somebody. It's a lot less of like the theories and the background and how those theories are actually put into practice, which is super helpful.
Mm.
Yeah, it's also, I like in terms of my assignments, I feel like they're more applicable, I guess is the best way to describe it. So it's a lot more case studies. It's a lot more, what would you say to this person if they came to you asking this? What would you diagnose this person as if they came to you? As opposed to like, okay, describe this theory and answer these questions in this way, which is what undergrad was in a nutshell for me. So the overall lessons alongside the homework that I had to do, I feel like actually set me up to be hopefully one day very good counselor, therapist, shrink, whatever anybody wants to call it. And again, I did not get that until I hit grad school, nowhere close. Maybe those
Mm.
final 2 classes my senior year of undergrad, but it was nowhere close to what we're currently dealing with in terms of just the classes I've been taking.
Mm. Can you give some
Mhm.
examples of like specific classes where
Yeah.
where you get taught these really practical skills?
Yeah, so my favorite class I would say that I've taken by far, I took I think it was just counseling psychotherapy,
Mm.
I think it was just a very broad name for it. And I think again it's a requirement. So any college that you go to in New York, if you're studying to hopefully get your LMHC, you're gonna have to take certain courses. So there are, I don't know, I take maybe 5 electives, but overall all the other ones are required by New York State. So I believe that that one is one of them. Um, and it was basically, okay, read through the DSM, read these, and then we had basically a textbook for the DSM and then a textbook of just case studies. And it would say,
Mm.
okay, read this case study. And it says, okay, Bob came in, he's a 29-year-old Caucasian male. He is having a hard time in classes. He struggles answering questions. He's anxious. He's sweating, blah, blah, blah. And you look at the DSM and you look at the different notes and you basically diagnose them. You say why you diagnose them. You also say other diagnoses you could come up with. So there are so many diagnoses in the DSM that you look at one and you're like, this sounds really good for X, but it also sounds really good for Y. And you have to explain why you could do either. That's also why you hear a lot of things like, well, I went to one doctor and they said this, and I went to one doctor, they said that, right? Because a lot of what we do is subjective, no matter how much you try to make it not be. There are some that are really stand outish, but overall, a lot of it is just subjective work. So I thought it was very cool to just be able to look and be like, oh, well, this is what I said, but I could also really say this, you know, to argue why. So basically my entire course load was doing that. The DSM is like this thick, probably. It's really big. So however long a semester takes, by the time we made it to the end, I had covered basically all of the main disorders in the text and just looked at what they
Mm.
might look like. Um, those kind of things. What else have I taken that was super interesting? I took a risk assessment course, which I loved.
Mm.
That was technically, I think, actually my capstone course in undergrad. Um, but I did take that one, and that was basically just going over different risk assessments in terms of suicide risk assessments, trauma, psychopathy, things of that nature. And my professor actually made it really cool where she would have us watch like a video on like Charles Manson. And she'd be like,
Mm.
just write down what you see, write down what you think. And you have to write it down. And then she'd be like, okay, now give them this assessment, right? And I'm not legally allowed to do that, but just like a pretend assessment. Um, and I remember doing the Charles Manson one and being like, check, 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 and like every single thing that possibly could have been on there. And it's very interesting because then you look at that and then you write up a report and you say, okay, I met with Charles Manson on whatever day. These are the symptoms that he displayed, XYZ. I'm giving him this diagnosis because of XYZ. And it actually gave us the experience of conducting one. Again, this was in COVID, so I think this was the best that she could do with what she
Mm.
was given. Just a general experience of meeting somebody and observing them, because again, assessments aren't always, okay, well, how are you feeling today? When was the last time
Mm.
you had a negative thought? Sometimes it's just talking to somebody, how I'm talking to you right now. And I'd say, okay, Tusher's doing a really good job maintaining eye contact. You're going to write that down. And that's a scale, right? So if the whole time I'm talking to you and you're looking this way, I'm going to be like, oh, I'm going to write that as a 0. So just those little things of being able to pick up on, because it's not always outward questions that you ask someone. There are some assessments where that is, and it's just a general conversation. But there are also times where they just ask about the person's general demeanor, or if they're
Mm.
rambling, or if they can't speak in a clear thought pattern, or whatever it is, and just getting the habit of just outwardly being able to do that, which is it's harder than it seems, because there are a lot of things that I think people just like overlook, because I'm just like, oh, okay, he's not looking at me, okay, maybe he's not interested, or he's rambling, but maybe he's nervous, or but there are a lot of those things that if you actually look into them and focus harder on them, it may help you with a diagnosis. So that was a really cool one that I took as well.
Mm.
Mm, yeah.
Has being in grad school specifically for psychology made how has it impacted your own sort of perception of your emotions and your thoughts? Because I've got to imagine that that's it must be kind of strange. You spend a lot of hours in the day studying this stuff academically. How does that impact your own uh the own way you feel emotion, or sort of yeah, or is there any impact?
Yeah. I would say I think that every early class that I took in grad school, the professor made a note to be like, do not diagnose yourself. Because you're going
Yeah,
to
yeah.
read through all these disorders, right? And you're going to read all these symptoms. You're like, oh my goodness, like I have all of this. And you leave and you're like, I have OCD, I have ADHD, I'm bipolar 2, I'm whatever. And you like go crazy, right? So once you get past that, you realize like, okay, everybody maybe has a little bit of something, or maybe I have a little bit of something, but I'm
Mm.
overall functioning very well, right? Once you get past that little stressfulness, um, I think that it has done a phenomenal job at just helping me understand my behaviors overall,
Mm.
and just thinking deeper about why I'm acting a certain way. Um, because my go-to advice is even therapists need therapists, right? So you can have logic, you can have all the information that you need to help somebody else, but it's extremely hard to take that logic and thinking and put it onto yourself. So I do think that it's a
Mm.
skill that I'm still using every day. Full transparency, I go to therapy 2 times a month, because I think that it's hard to do, but it does in the grand scheme of things, right? But I do think on the day to day, like if I come home from work and I'm agitated and I'm just being snippy, I'm like, well, maybe I think it's good with like self-regulation is the best way I can
Mm.
describe it. So if I come home from work and I'm snippy and I'm just like very short, and I'm like, why are you being snippy? Well, something at work happened today and it really upset you. What about it upset you? It really made me feel low about myself. Okay. And what does that do to your self-esteem? It makes you feel really low. What do you do when you feel low? Oh, well, sometimes I take it out on other people who don't deserve it. And then you're like,
Mm.
oh, okay. Maybe I shouldn't be doing that. Right. So I feel like it kind of just helps you run through just generally why you're being how you are, as opposed to just being like, well,
Mm.
I'm in a bad mood because I had a bad day. It's deeper than that. Everything is always deeper than that. And aside from myself, I would say that it's just overall helped like my relationships with others. It's helped me understand other people's behaviors, other people's impulses, their motives, why they do certain things. Um, just like in my relationship, which is actually the reason why we're on this call. So thank you, Makai. We're gonna
Yeah.
shout you out real quick. But yeah, just like if we're getting in an argument and I feel like we're not seeing eye to eye, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm looking at it from this piece and he's looking at it from this piece, or my friends or whatever. I think it's just helped a lot, really overall, just being more understanding of like,
Mm.
and like just forgiving of yourself and other people, and just understanding that I feel like everyone's just doing the best they're trying to do at the end of the day. Not to be all like, I don't know, zen, whatever, but I really do think that people are just trying their best. And when you can look at people and yourself, that's yourself included, when you're able to look at it that way, I feel like it just is very helpful overall. So yeah, I would say that
Mm.
it's definitely just opened up my eyes. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, like I said, just behaviors overall.
Yeah.
But I think I
Sounds
see it
like.
definitely more with other people,
Mm.
my relationships with
So
others.
I see. So a greater sense of empathy, maybe, and an ability to connect the sort of behavioral pattern of dots in real time, but specifically with other people, and maybe the skill is a bit less self-referential. Like it's harder,
Yeah.
it's hard to do alone or in a
Mhm.
vacuum.
Yes. Always.
Cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, any other thoughts? Is there something important that we haven't covered?
I think just the overall process. I think that if anybody is interested in being an LMHC, it is not you graduate and you're done. I think I started out and I was like, I'm going to graduate from grad school and I'm just going to have my license. And that's actually not how it works at all. So I feel like it's good to just put out there. Licensure in New York is very hard for a good reason. It's not an easy thing to do. And we are quite literally dealing with people's sanities, people's lives, people's livelihood. So I don't say that in a bad way. It just is what it is. But you're in grad school. In grad school, you have 600 hours that you have to complete. And until you finish those 600 hours, you cannot graduate. So that's what I'm doing right now. I am part of an internship. You don't get paid for this internship. It is what it is. But I believe it's half and half. So it's 300 direct client hours and the other half is meetings, it's trainings, it's whatever it is. Either way, you cannot graduate from your school until you get that. You finish that, you graduate, and then you only have a limited permit. So you're just going to have Airicka Garnere, LMHC, LP, right? It doesn't sound quite as good. You have your limited permit status. After you have that, you essentially are going to go to work. You're going to have a normal career. You're going to work a normal 9 to 5 or however you can work, but you're still under a supervisor. So New York has certain credentials that a supervisor has to have. And under that supervisor, you still have to have 3,000 supervised hours. So you can't just open your own private practice and do whatever you want to do. You do have to have somebody who you're meeting with, who is checking in on you, who's making sure you are crossing all the bases, I guess is the best way to say it. During that time, most people start studying for the big old test, NCMHCE. I don't really know what I don't know. It stands for something really big and it's a really important test. It's kind of like the NCLEX for nurses is the best way to describe it. You study for that, you take it, you pass it, then you're finally, woohoo, you're licensed mental health counselor in the state of New York. And then from there, you can actually open a private practice. You don't have to worry so much about your supervisor or things like that. But I think it is way longer of a process than some people think. So I think that it's important to just put out there because it's definitely longer than a 2-year program, I guess is just what I'm trying to make clear. It's not just that. So yeah.
Yeah. Do you know the pass rate on the licensure exam? Out of curiosity, I don't know.
I don't know. I think that I've been keeping it in the far away zone.
Yeah.
I haven't taken a huge exam. I mean, again, I got very blessed with not having to take the GRE. So I haven't taken like a big exam since like my SAT, and that was like 7 years ago. So I feel like I'm just like, oh, I'll cross that bridge when I get there and I'll do all that. But yeah, I have no idea, but I know it's a big deal. I know that people spend a lot of time studying it, making sure that they pass it. So I don't know, fingers crossed.
Yeah, I think thank you for doing this. I think it's I think you're going to make a great counselor. I'm curious to see where your journey leads you. Before we go, I thought I'm going to try something out. I want you to think of one question that I can ask the next guest, sort of without knowing who they'll be. It can be something banal and or something deep. It's totally your choice.
Oh, okay.
It helps me out because generating questions is hard.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm sure. I have no clue what I would ask people, so I totally understand. But you did good. You asked good questions. So let's see. I'm always curious to think for myself, I think maybe. So I think it would be interesting to hear what other people have to say. If for some reason you like something weird happens or you have a quarter life crisis, whatever, and you decide you don't want to be a counselor anymore, what are you going to do? What are you going to be? What I feel like what is your next career path? What's your next life path? Because there aren't a lot of careers that are synonymous It's like you're a therapist or you're a therapist, sure, we have our different levels. There's social work,
Hmm.
there's whatever, but like overall, it's not like, oh, I don't want to teach history anymore, so I'm going to teach art. We don't really have that.
Hmm.
So I'm always curious, like, what would somebody do if after all this, you're just like, or if
Now,
not, if you didn't do this, if you did, forget a midlife crisis, what would you do if you weren't doing this? What was your second option of a future career? I think that's always super interesting.
if you were not doing what you're currently doing, what would it be?
What would it be? Yeah.
I got you. All
Mhm.
right. That's
Yeah.
great. Thank you so
Yay.
much.
Yes, of
Um,
course. Thanks for having me.
yeah,
I appreciate it.
absolutely.